I'm Virginia Kimani. My initial training was as an agriculturalist at the University of Nairobi. I studied a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture. Subsequently, I did a master's degree in what is called crop protection, more or less, or plant disease. And I studied how pesticides can be used to control diseases, whereafter I did some studies on after the pesticide is applied on tomatoes, what happens? What happens to the residues? So I made some studies on residues in tomatoes and analyzed the residues and how much there was and what could be done about it. So that's my studies in the master's level. I completed that study, and later on I studied for a PhD in overall subject of pesticides, where I did some studies on how pesticides behave in food crops, a subject we call, toxicology, epidemiology, these kind of discussions. So I did some studies there. I had a joint program with the University of Guelph in Ontario in Canada and the University of Nairobi. So I graduated with my PhD at that point, which was basically in the area of pesticides, having done also some studies in Kirinyaga with some growers who are growing all manner of crops, beans, and other types of crops. So that is my background. And I worked for government for some time in the area of legislation of pesticides. And later on, I launched out as a consultant, and I've been working as a consultant for quite some years now in the area of pesticides. Pesticides, when they are applied on a crop or an animal or the environment, they need time to work. You need to give them time to do what you wanted them to do on that surface, whether it is a crop or whether it's an animal, or even on people, because sometimes pesticides are used on people, depending on what the problem is. But the reality is that a pesticide always continues to break down. This is the reason why we reapply pesticides. Otherwise, we would put once and we wouldn't need to reapply. But just like other control measures that we have, the time that it takes is the time that the chemical is working. But then now it has to break down. Now there are many ways in which a pesticide breaks down. A pesticide will be broken down by light, just light, sunlight, because sunlight, is a powerful energy. So it breaks down, and we call that process photolysis. It's a it's a certain process, photodecomposition or photocomposition. It just breaks down. And a pesticide can be broken down by water, just moisture. You put it out there, there is some moisture, the pesticide will break down because of the moisture. It can also be broken down by microorganisms. There are microorganisms in the environment. There are bacteria, there are viruses, there are what we call fungi, what we call other like algae and others. Now, all these organisms even depend, sometimes they get food from the pesticide. So the reason why the microorganism, for example, is breaking down a pesticide, which is let's say it's on a soil surface, it's looking for food. It will break down that organic component and get some food out of it. So they do that. The other way that pesticides will disappear or not be on the surface is because they can evaporate. That is a process that is facilitated now by the air currents. So and we call that polarization, the air currents will carry the pesticide away from the surface. So that is a normal process. Pesticides are also metabolized by the plant. The plant itself will metabolize the pesticide. Like when you apply the pesticide, the plant is a powerful mechanism with enzymes also. So those enzymes can also break down the chemical. So in other words, there are many ways that the chemical or the pesticide will be attacked. We can say attacked by all these factors, and then the levels will go down. So now the time that it takes for that pesticide to break down then is dependent on a couple of factors, especially what we call physical and chemical properties. So there are some which can easily be broken down by water, others can be broken down by the air through what we call oxidation. It's a chemical reaction. So all sorts of things are happening there depending on the character of the chemical. Pests they thrive on attacking crops. Plant diseases are very strong components. And it is not just, when we talk about pesticides, we are not just talking about crops. We are talking about human health, we are talking about animal health. But to illustrate how serious the issue of lack of a pest control measure, the impact that it can have on people, is an interesting story about what is called the Great Famine that happened in Ireland between 1845 and 1849 in the country of Ireland, whereby the population, most of the population depended on potato crop. And what happened was, by a turn of events that were both political and economic, there was a disease of potatoes that devastated the potatoes in that country. Believe it or not, this disease devastated the crop so much that it resulted in the death of 1 million people. It is called the Great Famine of Ireland. And even now, you can read it in Britannica or wherever. It is all over the internet. So this famine led to the death of 1 million people and the immigration of at least 1.5 million people from Ireland to the US. You can imagine 100 million people dying because of a disease. Now, the reason it happened in those early days is because the disease that was causing the devastation of the potatoes, there was no control. There was no proper control. It's a well-known story. The disease is called Phytophthora infestans, and it attacks potatoes, attacks tomatoes. Even now, in Kenya, there's no way you can grow potatoes without controlling that disease. So we would be talking about a situation where there are no potatoes and tomatoes, because both of them are affected by the disease, and farmers have to control that disease. Because the products that were now useful for controlling that disease were discovered a little bit later than that. But these are the kind of impacts. And if you look at the situation now with what has been going on with the locusts, there has been a lot of effort that has gone into controlling locusts in Africa, in India, in Pakistan. It's been a very serious effort with the FAO and some other groups. And it's because international organizations understand the impact of such kind of pests. Now, if I can move to the area of human health and pesticide use. In 2018, talking about malaria, an estimated 228 million cases of malaria occurred worldwide. 19 countries in Africa are the ones who accounted for 85% of that global malaria burden. Now, we are talking about that even when there are some ways in which mosquitoes are being controlled. Even here in Kenya, it's a big issue. The use of insecticide-treated bed nets to control malaria, especially for children. So I don't know what the statistics would be looking like if we didn't control mosquitoes. We would have some serious problems with malaria, and especially with children, and also with pregnant mothers, because those are the weakest population. Animal health, to say the last one, tick-borne diseases are documented to cause financial losses of more than 30 billion per year in Kenya. Tick-borne diseases, there are diseases that are transmitted by ticks, East Coast fever, and some other diseases in cattle. Now, if they are not controlled using acaricides, we can forget about having dairy animals producing the milk that we have, or even meat. and generally beef. So it's a serious issue. I can't even imagine a situation where we don't have options to control these pests and vectors of diseases of humans, diseases of animals. In general good practice, you don't spray pesticides near water. There's what is called riparian land. The riparian land is not just interesting for urban areas whereby, people should not build houses next to the water. We are also talking about agricultural activity. There is a scientific basis for saying that up to this point near the water body, crops should not be there. So, I mean, that legislation is generally in place, I think, with NEMA. Users also should not mix chemicals near open water. Like if you are a grower, even if you happen to have your shamba next to the river, you cannot mix pesticides near water. You also don't dispose containers after cleaning them. I mean, you don't dispose them. First, okay, the main point here is that you must clean the containers thoroughly. Like when a container has been cleared of a pesticide, the pesticide has been used, and you have just maybe the little bit that is normally left there, you would clean it. And the way we recommend is something called triple rinsing or 3 times rinsing. You can even rinse 4 times. You are free to do that. So when you do that, then you dispose of that container. Now, I understand that it is quite common now for growers to give back the containers to companies, and the accountants which are very busy collecting those, they have a system where they are collecting the empty containers which have been rinsed. But even if there is no system, a container can be buried, and in general good practice, it is good to bury it together with some plant material, to add there maybe charcoal, something to promote absorption of that chemical onto that material and onto the soil, so that now it is breaking down slowly. The microorganisms are breaking it down, and it is generally not going to enter the water table. Pesticides are effective. Yes. They have been known to be effective. They can control a disease. You apply it on Phytophthora infestans, like I said. It kills a fungus, which otherwise will kill your plant. They kill or they control or repel insects so that they keep away from your target, because your target is the crop and you want to spare the crop. Anyway, pesticides are quick acting also, and their use has been generally standardized. That almost all the molecules that have been known, they have been standardized in one part of the world or another. So global organizations like the Food and Agriculture Organization, the WHO, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, all these organizations which are global and have a lot of participation from international community, they have already checked and counter-checked how pesticides can be used. So pesticides should be supported, because the difference between not having something to use to control a nuisance pest and having one is very big. There is a lot of ignorance about the topic. You see, Kenya has a legislation. Kenya has the Pest Control Products Act. We have what is called subsidiary legislation controlling or helping in all manner of issues to do with pesticides. These laws were passed by Parliament back in 1982, and then there were reviews in 1984. There were reviews in 2012. Even now, there is an ongoing discussion about a pesticide bill. So there's a lot that has been discussed. Kenya is also a member of the various global treaties that determine the use of pesticides, the Rotterdam Convention and other conventions that govern international management of pesticides. I mean, it's a bit ludicrous to think that the government of Kenya can have a system which is going to poison its citizens. Because if you don't have, if the government is poisoning its citizens, then it doesn't have people to govern, or people, they don't have a population. So it's inconsistent that, someone would make a statement that Kenya is allowing its citizens to be poisoned. It's ludicrous, because no government, right thinking, can go ahead and recommend and say, let's have these poisons which are going to poison our people. They are going to, the population will be decimated. So as you can see, the population is not decimated. We have some other risks that are really serious in our population. And I would say that these statements are coming from ignorant people who, by the way, there might be some other types of interests here and there, some of which can be political from outside, supported by some other, in the international arena, there are groups that want to further their agenda, and they can further those agendas, not necessarily in their own country, but outside, just basically to gain some traction for themselves as a group in the political arena. There's no way the government can go ahead and recommend something that is going to poison its own citizens.